Okay, so up next, we have a special guest who's going to be talking about perseverance in the industry. So I'm happy to introduce to the stream Jorge Gutierrez, director and artist known for El Tigre, Book of Life, Maya and the Three, and a proud owner of a very large Feathers McGraw statue that I'm very curious about. So let's bring on Jorge.
Hello, hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing super good. I'm super excited. Thank you guys for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, so far people are having a great time. Wild, chaotic, as you can imagine, with 24-hour Ultimate Anim Challenge. We've had some wild tech issues, but we are rolling through it. We're powering through it. We're getting there.
As it should be. Hey, by the way, that is animation, right? You
Yep.
make plans and animation gods just laugh. That's basically how I
Mm-hmm.
sum it up.
Mm-hmm. They can smell fear. They can smell chaos. So just like,
Yeah,
we saw that.
yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about today? And then you can go into your presentation. I'll just go
Sure.
into the shadows, and then I'll come
Yeah, yeah,
back
yeah.
with Nay.
So the plan is I'm going to talk for 30 minutes about perseverance in animation, and I can only talk about my personal experience. So I have like 400 panels. I'm going to talk really fast for 30 minutes, and then we'll do 20-minute Q&A at the end. And yeah, like if you like Cuban coffee, you're about to get 2 shots in each eyeball. So
Perfect. Could you try sharing your screen just so we
yes.
can see that it sets up right?
So
Shouldn't be
I
an issue.
did
But
stop sharing screen. I have shared my screen.
let's see. Oh,
There it is.
there we go.
Yep.
Cool. Is there anything in the presentation that has audio that you
No,
want to play?
no.
Perfect.
Yeah, don't
Awesome.
even. I know better.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. You got this. Have a great time. I will be
All right,
back.
you guys. Thank you, Vincent. All right, you guys. So my 30-minute talk is called "We Are All Tigers." I'm gonna go pretty fast. So if you have any questions, write them down. And here we go. So why should you listen to me? All right. So these are the 3 things I've done. Big things. I did a show called Antigua with my wife Sandra. I made a movie that Guillermo del Toro produced. And the biggest thing I've done recently is I wrote and directed and created a limited series for Netflix called Maya and the Three. Have all done commercially and critically pretty good. Story began 50 years ago. I am originally from Mexico City, literally just another kid from Mexico. I am autistic, and especially back then, I did not know. My dad was an architect. My mom was super bohemian. I think my dad was autistic. They took me to see a movie called Pinocchio, Revival House. I'm not that old. And they showed me this movie, and it traumatized me because it killed Pinocchio. But it really affected me, this movie. So I began to cosplay as Pinocchio all the time. And I started saying this phrase, I want to be a real boy, which looking back, I think I wanted to just be another kid, right? Be a normal kid. I didn't know I was different. Everybody in my family said he's a little weird and he really likes to draw. And I kind of realized I wasn't like other kids. My dad would always ask me, why do you love to draw? And I would always say, I don't know. And he loved that. So, 6-year-old drawings, regular 6-year-old drawings. I got in trouble. I got expelled from school for drawing my first nude of Wonder Woman. I love drawing the devil. I was a terrible speller. I'm dyslexic. So this is Michael Jackson's Thriller. I was kind of into dressing up as other characters because I just wanted to be normal. And then something huge happened in my life. When I was 8 years old, I got expelled for getting in a fight. Uh, and I got sent home, and my mom said, wait till your dad finds out. And when dad came in and he said, all right, Jorge, I have 2 questions for you. And I was terrified. And he said, one, did you fight a kid that was bigger than you? And I said, yeah, he's a year older, and he's in the class above me, and he got a huge smile. And he said, Jorge, never fight anybody smaller than you because you'll be a coward. Never fight anybody your own size because you'll learn nothing. If you get in a fight, only fight people bigger than you because then you'll learn. Even if they beat you up, you'll learn and you'll prove you have courage. Don't tell your mother. And I was like, wow, okay. And he says, second question, why did you get in a fight? More important than fighting is why do you get in a fight? Why did you get in a fight? I said, well, because this kid was bullying the brother of the girl I like. And he got an even bigger smile. And he said, as long as you fight for what you believe in, you can't lose. Even if you lose, you won. And it really sort of exploded my brain at that point. And he told me this philosophy that I carry to this day. He said, Jorge, you're born a puma, and every experience makes you a tiger. Each of these are little stripes. Um, Good or bad, stripes are equal. Whether you win or you lose, the experience is what matters. So that's where El Tigre came from. And he said, and my biggest dream is that when you die a panther because you've experienced everything, Jorge. So my life changes forever at that moment. Literally, my brain explodes. 9 years old, we moved to Tijuana, which is a border city between the U.S. and Mexico. It was the most dangerous city in the world back then. That's literally where I grew up. I would cross the border every day. Started going to school in the U.S., kept drawing, and then The Simpsons showed up in my city, in Tijuana. And something again happened in my brain where I said, if my city exists in this cartoon, then I exist. And so I kept drawing, 12 years old, kept doing comics, started writing a bunch. I went to a public arts community college in Mexico. I got to show my drawings at a museum at 15 years old, and I really felt like, wow, maybe I could do this for a living one day. I discovered world cinema. I was a high school junior. I met the girl of my dreams, who I'm still married to. I proposed 2 weeks from when I met her, and she said no. And back then, I was already like, anytime people reject me, I'm okay with it. I'll convince them at some point. Cal Arts was the school that I was told, if you can get in there, you can prove. My father said, you can prove to me you are worthy of being my son and studying this. And so Cal Arts was super hard to get into. Back then, it was for every applicant, 350 students got in. I showed up. I said, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to get in a year early or get rejected a year early. So I applied as a high school junior. And they told me, well, you get rejected 2 to 3 or sometimes 4 times in a row before you can get in. Again, rejection, right? That's part of growth. And so I said, all right, well, I'll get rejected early. So I showed up with figure drawings. And when I called them, they said, you need animation style drawings. So I drew on the phone. They told me, like Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny or Bart Simpson. So I literally drew Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny, Bart Simpson. And then they said, and you need to bring some of your personal work. And I had no idea what that meant. So I showed up to this portfolio review with my animation portfolio, which was figure drawings and animation drawings. And then I had a painting portfolio that I was going to show to the painting school just to see what a real painter would say. Head of the animation program back then was Jules Engel, Holocaust survivor, incredible artist, had worked at Disney, UPA, just genius. And he reviewed my work. He told me this is garbage. He said, your drawings are very generic. And then when he saw my animation drawings, he said, a copy machine could have done these. You have no voice. You say nothing. You are not an artist. And again, he didn't know I was 17. And he said words that spoke to me. And again, I got a tattoo of those words in my soul. He said, an artist is someone who has a voice, and you don't have a voice. You say nothing. Figure out something else to do with your life. An artist you are not. So he closed my portfolio. I was devastated. I walked away. Universe took pity on me. I left my painting portfolio. He saw this painting, which he eventually bought from me. And he said, what the hell is this? And I said, oh, it's a lady who had an affair with a coyote, and it's about the U.S.-Mexican border, and she has like half coyote babies. And he started laughing. And he said, all right, I like this. And every painting I showed him was pretty crazy. And he said, you son of a bitch. And he asked me the same thing my dad had asked me a million times. Why did you do these? And I said, I don't know. And he started laughing and he said, because you're an artist, you idiot. This is your voice. And so that was it. He let me in. He accepted me as a high school junior into the school. He said something that stayed with me. He said, I like how you see the world. You see it very differently. And again, I think it's because I'm autistic. As the earliest ID I could find, experimental animation was the school where 3 of my heroes had gone to in this department specifically. Steven Hillenburg, the creator of SpongeBob, Henry Selick, who directed Night Before Christmas, and Peter Chung, who did Ian Flux. Those were my 3 sort of guiding stars. I met super like-minded people. I worked harder than I've ever worked. I got rejected. I basically did so much work. I made a deal with a school. I tried to do 3 years worth of classes in 1 year, and they said if you get a high pass in every class for 2 years worth in 1 year, we'll give you a reward. And that's what I did. I killed my. I just outworked everybody. I worked super hard, and the school gave me a full scholarship. And again, because I'm autistic, I could work and focus more than most people. I met lots of. I'm a big kung fu movie fan, so I got to meet a lot of my heroes. I would visit my girlfriend Sandra every 2 weeks in Tijuana. We got in trouble all over. I ended up getting a BFA in '97, MFA in 2000. I did all types of animation back then. CalArts wanted me to do a short every year. I did, I think, 4 shorts my first year, and by the time I graduated, I'd done 16 shorts. So shorts meant nothing to me. They were just literally little bricks to build a portfolio. Sandra became sort of my muse. I did fake documentaries. I did stop motion. I got into computer animation, which I hated, but I said, this is, a coward would run away from something they don't like. I'm going to embrace something that I know is the future. Eventually, I got an internship working at Sony, and I hated being a character animation intern. And I said, all right, this is not for me. I got to refocus. If I want to make my own stuff, I got to focus on writing, and I got to focus on developing my ideas because there's better artists than me, so I have to outthink them. So I really embraced computer animation. My master's, I ended up only doing 2 shorts, 2 thesis films. One was stop motion, one was CG. The CG one, I think, turned out better than the other one. It was about a kid who wanted to be a bullfighter made out of wood, right? Pinocchio, on Day of the Dead, and he dies. This is basically where Book of Life came from. It won a student Emmy, and immediately I got a manager thanks to that. So thank you, autism. Because of how well this little film did, I got to go to the Cannes Film Festival, and I met a ton of producers. And eventually I was asked to pitch a movie based on my short. This is a student version of the Book of Life. This is basically my pitch for the Book of Life. And I got sent to every studio in town. Everybody rejected me. They said no one wants to see a film about dead Mexicans. Every single studio told me this. My student visa was running out at that point. Back then, and I think it's still the same now. If you don't get a studio to sponsor your visa, you get deported back to your country. So motivation to find work was different for me. And I saw all these crappy internet cartoons, and I said, well, I know how to make cartoons. So I got a pirate version of Flash. And then after spending 3 years making an 8-minute short, I spent 2 months doing a 3-minute short on Flash about this Mexican wrestler who fights for an orphanage. This was before Nacho Libre. And Sony Pictures saw it. I put it online. I got 20,000 views in one night, which is like 2 million views today. And it kind of started my career. This was the pitch art that I did to sell the short. First episode is on YouTube if you guys ever look for it. Day of the Dead proposal, right? At that point, I proposed to Sandra. Then we got married a year later. And I said, oh my God, this is incredible. I cannot believe this country, they just pay you to make your own stuff. Because I got to write them and direct them and voice them and animate them and basically do everything. And I felt like we made it. And then 2 months after the wedding, they canceled this division. And I said, all right, more stripes for these tigers. Let's embrace this failure and move on. And I got hired. I applied everywhere, and I got hired on this show called Mucha Lucha, created by an artist from England and an artist from Malaysia. And they were living in Australia when they pitched it. And of course, at some point, they were like, we probably should hire Mexicans to work on this. So I worked on Mucha Lucha, and at the same time, I was doing freelance everywhere. Anybody who hired me back then, you hired me to do one thing, I'd give you 10. And I kept saying, like, I'm just getting better and faster. And the more stuff I do, the more work I get. So I became a self-professed workaholic. And I said, well, I saw the internet cartoon. How hard would it be to sell a TV show? So I started pitching TV shows. All these are rejected pitches for shows that never sold. None of these went anywhere. So after all those failures, Walt Disney TV back then said, all right, you keep coming back. You keep coming back with new ideas, and they keep getting better. We like this one. And so we developed Pepe the Bull. This is the Bible for Pepe the Bull. It was one of the first pilots done in Flash at Disney TV. It tested, and then they said, we want to make it for girls. So we said, no, that doesn't make any sense. So they killed our show. But they liked it so much, we got to work on another show over there called The Buzz on Maggie. That show eventually got canceled. And again, I was like, wow, they keep paying us to get better. This is amazing. I love all these experiences. So then we did 3 more shows. At Disney and Warner Brothers. I only found the Bible for one. This was a show that we developed at Disney. Very much my love letter to Hellboy, but sort of our crazy version of it. It died. But then after that one, at that point, I had done 4 pilots. So I knew exactly how to make a pilot. I had learned so much from all those previous failures that on this 4th one, we did El Tigre. Basically, the show that got picked up, pilot 2004, series 2006, inspired by our lives growing up in Mexico and in Tijuana and Mexico City. This is what we look like. I usually design the guys. My wife designs the girls. We collaborate on the villains. El Tigre is about a kid who is different, so very, very much an autistic hero. There's no tigers in Mexico, but very much inspired by tigers everywhere in the culture. Mexican wrestling and over-the-top Mexican bandits and mech suits, which are not Mexican, but I love them. 90s punk girls, golden era of cinema in Mexico. I had written Book of Life, so the villain in El Tigre is the daughter of the 2 gods in Book of Life. Already, I was a huge fan of Ren and Stimpy, so we got to work with a lot of artists. We were the first show to do color scripts at Nickelodeon. We were the first show to board digitally. They kind of left us alone thanks to technology, thanks to the fact that we were so new. They kind of didn't know what to make of us. The show came out, it was a huge hit, 3.4 million views. Back then, it was a huge deal. People started dressing up as the characters. We started getting letters. It was, McDonald's toys and DVDs. The show won Best Show and Best Character Design. This one I'm super proud of. Sandra won. She was the first ever Mexican woman to win an Emmy for character design, and she looked stunning in that picture. So all in all, the show won 5 Emmys. It's the most Emmys ever won by a show for one season. We thought, oh my God, we made it, and they canceled the show. So after that failure, I went to DreamWorks to develop the Book of Life. It was called The Matador back then, and it did not work out. At some point, they said, what if it's a hip-hop salsa musical with Lin-Manuel Miranda? And I said, no, thank you. And so they killed it. So after that failure, we went back to Disney. We made another pilot over there about this rebellious punk girl who breaks the rules for good. It's called Carmen Gets Expelled. The pilot's on YouTube. It tested really well, and then they wanted to change a billion things. So we said, no, thank you. And so they killed it. So after that failure, I went back to Nickelodeon. Sandra did not want to go back to Nickelodeon. We had a kid. We had just had a kid, so she said, I'm going to focus on being a good mom. So I went to Nickelodeon. I did this crazy Mexican wrestling video game Hamlet-inspired show. It's pretty nuts. It was going to be video games. It was going to be pretty nuts. And then they wanted to change too many things back then. I said, no, thank you. So they killed it. So after that failure, I kept going, oh my God, they keep paying me to get better. And I don't put any, especially back then, I learned not to put merit on results. I would only put merit on process. So the fact that they would let me hire and work with a bunch of people I love and got to experiment and make all these things, and they paid me a ton of money, to me, that was a reward. If it got greenlit or it didn't get greenlit, that was a bonus. And so I think most creators back then didn't think that way. So that it really, I think being autistic really helped. 2010, I went to MAD. I got to do parodies of a bunch of properties that I love, including Street Fighter. I got asked to do my take on Batman. And apparently this ended up in Christopher Nolan's office. And the story is that he saw these and laughed. And then he said, absolutely not. So I'm happy that Christopher Nolan killed my Batman idea. So now what? So out of nowhere, this tiny studio called Real Effects says, hey, we heard you quit at DreamWorks to make this $180 million movie. We don't have $100 million. We have $25 million. What if we make an indie version of your movie? And so we moved to Texas. We got a year to write the script and design the movie. Again, I usually design the male characters. My wife designs the female characters. We got to hire Paul Sullivan as a art director and Simon Varela as a production designer. It was a super, super fun because we kind of got left to do our own thing. We almost got divorced designing La Muerte. She was really hard. Cibabo originally was the devil, and I learned you can have the devil in a kids movie, so he's a burnt angel. I got to design all these crazy characters. The modelers back then didn't know what to make of our drawings, so our production designer went to El Salvador and got all these amazing sculptors to do a maquette. And I think once they did that maquette, everybody in Dallas went, "Oh, okay." So we designed all this stuff. We got to do paintings. We wrote a crazy script. And then they said, "Who's your dream producer?" Of course, Guillermo del Toro. These pictures are of the house where I got to pitch to him. It's called Bleak House, where he has this crazy collection. He back then he lived in a house with his wife and 2 daughters, and then the next house was his house of collections. And I went over there, and I had the worst picture of all time because as my picture was going to start, in the mansion next door, there were like 5 leaf blower people, and they all started the leaf blowers at the same time, so I had to yell the pitch, and it was a disaster. And I felt like, oh man, I really screwed this up. There's no way he's going to like this movie now. But he told me, I watched El Tigre with my daughters. I know your sense of humor. I know your love for our culture. Of course, I'm going to produce your movie. So, we're buddies now, and Guillermo became our producer. We went to work. Because of Guillermo, we found a studio partner. 20th Century Fox became the studio. We worked our asses off on this movie. It was super hard. I wanted the movie to look like paintings, and we got pretty close. What you see in the top are paintings. At the bottom are stills from the movie. And then we ran out of money, and we had not done The Land of the Dead. And we had to figure out, well, how much can we afford? And they said, well, ideally you have 17 pieces of geometry. And so Paul Sullivan, basically we sat down and we said, all right, how do we do this? And with these 17 pieces of geometry, we did the whole Land of the Dead, or the Land of the Remembered. And people didn't believe us that it was only 17 pieces of geometry. So we had to do a breakdown and show this clip with no sound of what that looked like. And so as you guys can see, it's all matte paintings, all local lights, textures, lots of trickery in all of this. And then those are the geometry. That's the pieces. And I feel like this is my career. I can do a lot with very little, and the audience doesn't care. The audience doesn't care how much money you have. The audience doesn't care how long it took. The audience doesn't care how hard it was. They care about what's on the screen. And you're a magician. We're all magicians. And they're there to believe. So half of the work is already done by people showing up. Movie came out. I got to, show it all over the world. The premiere, I was warned none of the actors are going to show up. They all showed up. Zoe Saldana was 9 months pregnant, and she showed up. It was pretty crazy. Movie came out all over the world. Magazines, the album. There were bootlegs. Nominated for 5 Annie Awards, but it only won 1 for character design. And then this felt like the real reward. We started getting photos of people dressing up like the characters all over the world, conventions. It's pretty nuts. We still get them every year. Sometimes people get married as the characters. Camila Cabello dressed up as La Muerte. And then the tattoos. We started getting tattoos of our characters, which is pretty nuts. They did an illegal musical in Mexico, which I thought was pretty cool. And then we got asked by Microsoft to do a Super Bowl commercial of their computers and pretend that we did the movie using their computers. And we said, sure. And I think we got paid more to do this commercial than we got paid to do the movie. So thank you. And then at 40 years old, I was diagnosed with autism. I have a son who is also autistic, and my parents said, well, you just like him. And so I was diagnosed twice exceptional for anybody interested. There's lots of information about that. I think it's really helped me in my career, and it's really helped me, especially in animation, to be neurodivergent. I'm different, but it makes me me. I said I want to do something about that. So I got to go to Google and pitch a virtual reality short about Mexican wrestling. And I remember this bullfighter that was missing a leg that I thought was really interesting. So I researched a lot about basically sports where people are missing limbs. And I said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a wrestler who's missing a limb. It's going to be a metaphor for me feeling like I'm not like others, like I'm missing something because I'm autistic. And my son is autistic, and I feel like there's something lacking in my life. And so I'm going to spoil the short for you guys if you've never seen it. At the end, he realizes he's stronger because he's different. and his son becomes his leg. And that's what happened to me. I realized being autistic actually makes me better, and having a son who's autistic just fuels me to do even more stuff. So that's sort of the climax of the show. And Annie and Emmy nominations, didn't win anything. Then I started developing one of my dream projects, a Kung Fu space western called Kung Fu Space Punch. Wrote the script. This is some of the development for it. We're still trying to get this set up, and hopefully it happens sooner than later. This is sort of what the characters are going to look like. So hopefully, back then, no one wanted to make it because of a certain president became president, and no one wanted to do anything about the border. So it was put on hold. I went to Lego to direct the Lego movie for Chris and Phil, the Lego movie guys who I adore and I admire. This was the Lego movie I was going to direct. It was very much a spoof on Fast and the Furious. It got pretty far. We even did, we're designing vehicles and all the villains and casting and all these Paul Sullivan paintings. It was going to be pretty nuts. And then no more Lego movies. So then in 2018, we went to Netflix. I got to make our first baby, Maya and the Three, mostly working from home. I did not play Dungeons and Dragons growing up, so I started playing Dungeons and Dragons because I love Lord of the Rings and I wanted to do something about that. At this point, I'll do a drawing and then I'll paint it, and then it goes and becomes a maquette. So being the character designer and the director makes things really easy. Things just sail through. So in the left are Sandra's drawings, and the right are the finished models. This is what Sandra looked like when I met her, so that's kind of where Maya came from. The helmet's from a museum. I wanted to include not only Mexican Mesoamerica, but I wanted to include all of Latin America. So I had gone to Machu Picchu in Peru, and I wanted to include the Incas. I love this idea that there was an albino archer. I got to design the dad, and then I got to voice the dad, and the queen obviously was Sandra. I designed this character for Diego Luna, and I sent it to him, which you're not supposed to do. And I said, "Come on, Diego, you got to play this guy." And he said, "Fuck yeah!" And he just joined the show. I got to do my take on the God of War. All this is a fantasy inspired by Mesoamerica. We never say Aztec, Toltec, Incan, none of these words. It's not historical at all. It's a fantasy version, just like Lord of the Rings or, the Monkey King or any Clash of the Titans, anything that's inspired by lore and mythology. I said, well, I want to do my version of that. And we went nuts on the show. I'm a huge fan of The Wizard of Oz. So if anybody who's seen Maya, it is The Wizard of Oz. Maya is Dorothy. Rico the Wizard is the Scarecrow. Chimi the Archer is the Tin Man. And Pichu the Warrior is the Lion. We went nuts. Again, a lot of Paul Sullivan, beautiful paintings. This was a labor of love, incredible crew. Alex Constant did some of these. It's just a crazy, crazy experience. It's on Netflix. We kind of went nuts. Gustavo Santaolalla came back. The show came out. We started getting pictures. I can't believe someone had a party that looked like this. And then all the fan art started coming from all over the world. I'm especially happy that we got Japanese fan art. It's pretty great. People started dressing up as the characters, going to conventions dressed like them. Tattoos have started. Murals in Mexico City started popping up. Nominated for 7 Annie Awards. But the big reward to me was it was top 10 in 55 countries. It won 2 Annies out of 7, but it won the best Annie. And then I'm super proud of this. It won 4 Emmys out of 5 nominations. I'm dyslexic. I got held back in school. I was told I was dumb and that I didn't know how to write. And I won an Emmy for writing the finale of Maya. So my dad was still alive, so I got to dedicate it to him. So thank you, Maya. Started doing vinyl toys. I started doing painting murals. Film Festival started asking me to do posters. Apple asked me to do a bunch of art for Apple Music. El Tigre kept coming back in video games. I did a bunch of posters for Got Milk. And then Chris Nee and the Obamas asked me to direct and design a music video about becoming U.S. citizens. So we got to do our first ever music video. And it won an Emmy. So I never want to do another music video. That's basically it. And then in 2023, Guillermo del Toro said, Gordo, let's go to Annecy. Annecy invited me to design their poster. So I got to design the poster. And when I turned it in, they were like, we thought it'd be more Mexican. And I had to do this breakdown. I'm like, this is pretty Mexican. There's a ton of Mexican stuff. So all these failures, I'm going to show you guys more. We developed a sequel to Maya that hasn't moved forward. We started developing a movie that takes place in the Book of Life world. That's pretty nuts. Has not moved forward. And then my sweet baby, I Chihuahua, which is a movie that I'm trying to get made, is pretty nuts. Set in Tijuana. And then out of nowhere, the UFC asked me to design a poster for them. And then I got invited to brainstorm their event. This is what the poster looked like. I got to design outfits. I got to design Noche UFC stuff for them. For the first time ever, I got to design live action costumes of what the ring girls were going to look like. This event was nuts, but I got to do a bunch of stuff for them. It's kind of crazy. And then last Halloween, Simpsons asked me to do the opening for The Simpsons in my crazy style. So I got to pitch I want to do a horror Street Fighter Mortal Kombat version of The Simpsons, and they liked it. I have no idea if the sound will play, but it's only 22 seconds, so I'll play it and see if it goes. So imagine if 10-year-old Jorge, who was obsessed with The Simpsons, was told 40 years from now you'll get to do a Simpsons opening. He would have had a heart attack. So in conclusion, all these failures, if you really break these down, all these failures have made me just stronger, right? Like my dad said, they're just stripes because they're experiences. So whether things turn out good or whether things turn out bad, it didn't really matter. What mattered was the experience. And so I implore and encourage you guys to think about it that way. We are all tigers, right? All these are experiences. And if we're brave, we get to jump back in the ring. As my dad said, the fight is the gift. Whether you win or lose doesn't really matter. It's the fight that counts. And so I beg you guys, let's all die Panthers. Let's all experience everything. So thank you guys. Exactly 30 minutes. And we are good to do the Q&A.
That was exactly 30 minutes. When you said you had 400 slides, I was like, really 400 slides? And then you just went. That was incredible.
Thank you.
Okay, but honestly, there's so much to try and absorb there, but I just love everything that you covered from, I don't know, I just love what you included in there about how the differences that you had and how you saw things differently, how it became your strength. That's something which really resonates with me. I really appreciate you including that in your presentation and about yourself in this presentation to our audience. So thank you for that.
I found I was diagnosed when I was 40, and my reps back then said, "Don't tell anybody." And I was like, "What?" Mm-hmm. And they were like, "It's just another excuse for people not to want to work with you." And I said, "Well, if someone doesn't want to work with me because I'm neurodivergent, I don't want to work with them." So I changed representation, and mm-hmm. as I've worked in this industry, I realized I think half of the people I've ever worked with are probably neurodivergent and they just don't know it. And then a lot of directors above me that I've become friendly with, they all know they're autistic. They've just never been tested. And a lot of my fellow creators are now finding out, right? Because a lot of their kids are autistic, that they're autistic. And so it's some people are very open about it, right? Like Dan Harmon from Rick and Morty, or Maxwell Adams, the creator of Billy and Mandy. But definitely, I think it's more accepting, and I think this is very much a field, the arts, that is very welcoming to people like us.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I'm curious if people in the chat have some questions about everything that we just went over. Let's see. We have a question from Jorge Rustic 0. Question: personal style versus artistic excellence. Is it possible to create a good style while not being a great artist?
Whew, that's a great question. I guess for me, when I started early on, I realized there's draftsmanship and then there's creativity, and those two
Mhm.
things don't always go hand in hand, right? Because there could be some incredible draftsmen, but they're not designers, and they're not as creative as someone who can draw in a way that's so different. The old cliche
Mhm.
is Picasso, right? Like he could draw better than anybody, yet he chose to draw differently. I don't think you need to get to draw better than everybody to draw differently. I definitely think it helps. Uh, but I definitely think when the artist that I really gravitated towards in animation, the Tim Burtons and the Henry Seligs and the Ward Kimballs and the Ed Benedicts and the Mary Blairs and the Miguel Covarrubias and Sergio Aragonés, all these guys had completely different backgrounds. Some went to regular art school, some went to architecture school, some didn't go to school at all, some went to graphic design. So to me, it seemed like it didn't matter where you came from. And the thing that really sort of hit me was that you can't look for a style, the style finds you. And what I mean by that is the more you work, the more your style develops. And your style is a mix of everything you love, but everything you don't love. Because you will take out the things you're not into and accentuate the things you're into. The best example I can give of that is I got really lucky, and I had lunch with Mike Mignola, the creator of Hellboy, and like a fanboy,
It's,
we're eating sandwiches,
it's so cool.
and I'm like, Mike, I love how in your comic your characters are coming out of the dark and you don't see any of the background. So mysterious, really selling this idea that we don't know where we are and we never see their feet, and so it feels like they're not stepping on anything secure. It's so provocative. And he's like eating a sandwich, and he goes, Jorge, I hate drawing backgrounds, and I hate drawing feet. And he keeps eating. So your
Style
style,
choice.
right? So your style, again, a mix of what you love and a mix of what you don't love. And I definitely think what your style is this soup of everything you love and everything you don't love. But if your soup only has the same ingredients everybody else has, your soup will taste just like everybody else's soup. So what you put into that soup is really important. And so you have to be really, really smart and go, all right, as much as I love, and we were told this in school, as much as you love animation, stop looking at animation. Start going to the opera and go to ballet and go to museums and go to concerts and like find the things you love outside of your art form to inform your art form. Because if not, you're gonna
Mhm.
just regurgitate and bastardize the art form.
Mhm. I am curious. So, what was very interesting when you were presenting was all the different times that you've been pulled on by a studio and you had, this specific vision you wanted to make, and they're like, okay, yes, but what if we change it like this? And what if we change it like that? And like all that sort of stuff. And you found that power to say no and walk away from it. What do you think? Like, do you think always in your career, like, so for example, when you were a student, you would pitch the first pass of Book of Life to studios and they all rejected you. But back then, if one of the studios had said yes, but asked you to change it, do you think you would have said yes back then? Or do you think that power to say no was always in you? Or do you think it grew over time?
I think maybe I'm naive, but I would have said no.
Mm.
And even then, when I first had the movie at DreamWorks, they offered to buy it or rent it, and I think I'm the only idiot in the history of animation who said this movie will never get made here. Just rent it. So when I quit, they were like, "You can't quit. We bought this," and I was like, "Actually, you just optioned it."
Mm. Yeah,
Uh,
I was actually kind of curious, like, with how many times you've gotten canceled, how like you've handled like still keeping the IP because I know that's tough
It's
with
very, I mean, certain
studios.
studios will not give you your IP back, but a lot of them, it's funny with Book of Life when I quit and they couldn't believe that I quit and I took the movie. Jeffrey Katzenberg brought me in. He was the head of the studio back then. And he said, Jorge, and he honestly hadn't talked to me since the original pitch. And he said, I'm going to give you your movie back, and I'm going to give you a bunch of sorry it didn't work out money. And I want you to get this movie made somewhere. And I remember just going, why are you doing this? It's like, Jeffrey, seriously, why are you doing this? And here's what Jeffrey said. Because, Jorge, if you get this movie made, and you seem like someone who's going to get this movie made, if you get this movie made, you're going to tell the story forever. And I'm going to look like a good guy. And what am I doing right now?
There you go.
There you go. Jeffrey knew. But
wow. Okay.
But I think, early in my career, saying no, it always became money, right? It was, can I afford to say no? And in my head, it was always like, well, if they kill this thing, I'll just get a regular job. And when you can think like that, then you can say no. If you're like, this is my only opportunity, I'm a one-trick pony, this is literally the only thing I'll ever get to make, then no. You'll probably say yes to everything. But it became very clear to me that this is a career, this is a marathon. I'm a creator, I'm a writer, I'm a director, like I'm just gonna keep coming up with stuff. And I'm gonna get it made. And hey, studio, you wanna make this with me? Because if you don't, that's cool. I'll make it somewhere else.
That's really interesting because I've been lucky. Like I've also been given some good advice from like mentors in the industry on like when I've worked before, where they've told me before, you have to like respect yourself, because if you don't respect yourself and put yourself into situations where you don't respect yourself, that's not going to end well. You're going to paint yourself into a corner. You're going to end up in those situations where you're saying yes to things that you never wanted to say yes to.
Well, and you hit it in the nail. If you just say no to everything, it's not going to work. And if you say yes to everything, it's not going to work. So it's balance. It's knowing where to fight, pick your battles, where to weave. I mean, I'm 50 years old now, so now I've seen it all. I know exactly when a note is given, like what the real note is, what the concern is, and I think, what's that saying? Be wary of the old soldier, because he's lived long enough to be old. All these stories, they just make you aware of how hard all this stuff is. That's why it's really hard for me. When I was younger, I would just, basically shit on stuff I didn't like publicly. Now that I made a lot of stuff, I go, no, it's a miracle any of these things get made. And no one sets out to make something bad. It's just super hard.
That is exactly the perspective that I've gotten, because I've hit like animation, but also production side and management. And like now that I've seen all the sides of it, I very quickly went from that perspective of like being not exactly very critical, but just to the fact that anything gets made is amazing. And I love and respect that regardless of how it ended up in the end. Like once you really see that process, you're like, wow,
yeah,
that's incredible.
Oh yeah. And it takes time. It takes time to learn these things.
We have a question from chat from Dane Romley, who's participating in the challenge, and he's doing it solo as a 2D animator. So Dane, I hope you're surviving right now. You mentioned a lot of back then in regards to developing pitches and pilots. Do studios still work that way today? Do people still get asked and paid to create pitches for them?
I don't think anybody gets paid to pitch. It's free. You basically, I always did all my pitches at the end of the day when I was working and on the weekends. And I had friends who were like exhausted after work and they just didn't want to do any of that stuff. To me, it was like, well, what's the long term? I want to make my own stuff. And the best way to learn how to make a TV show is to work on somebody else's TV show. Best way to learn how to make a movie is to work on somebody else's movie. So I was just getting work and learning. Studios have always and will always go, hey, if you work on a hit show and you pitch something, maybe there's something in you. Right? So the creator of Adventure Time was working on Flapjack, and the creator of Gravity Falls was working on Fish Hooks. The creator of SpongeBob was working on Rocco's. Like when you do your breakdowns of where these creators came from, it's very rare that someone just came out of nowhere. obviously like Vivian Medrano is an anomaly. Most people have worked on other people's stuff and then eventually get their shot. But pitching is every studio is taking pitches everywhere. Right now, it's really hard because everybody wants famous intellectual properties, right? Famous IP based on video games and stuff. So it's never been harder for originals to get pitched. But this is cyclical. If you've been in the industry long enough, you realize this too shall pass. And at some point, they will want originals again, and you just have to keep honing their skills and be patient. All these giant IPs that are huge, guess what? They started as original IPs. SpongeBob started as an original IP. So we're in a moment in our industry where we're just getting over COVID, we're getting over the bubble burst of streaming. Things are starting to stabilize. The workforce was too big for the amount of stuff that was being made. I think we're back to a level that's more realistic, what it was before the boom. And I think I'm encouraging everybody, if you can just survive, get a job, not in animation, just survive and hang in there, you'll make it. But we're in the storm right now.
That is very interesting to hear your perspective on, because like I'm much newer to the industry and I came in right when the pandemic bubble happened. So like everything was great and people were watching all this animation, everybody was getting hired right at that cusp before everything went straight to hell. And I've definitely seen a lot of it was fun.
Yeah.
But I've definitely seen like a lot of conversations, especially, like from classmates from school, of trying to figure out like, oh, it's just like, is everything just a complete disaster now? And then other people coming in and talking about like the ups and downs of the industry of like, okay, the cycles and waves which come. So it's interesting seeing it from your perspective, since you've been in this industry for so long and you've seen the different phases it's go through. And it does make me happy to hear that you see that, oh, eventually we will get out of it.
Well, and the math of our industry is, with all the respect to everybody who's older, you age out at some point, and the new generations come in with new ways of thinking and new ideas. And I was once that generation, and I kept looking at the older people above me and going like, how am I going to get my shot? Well, guess what happens? You keep trying and you do get your shot. And then people retire. And guess what? All those openings happen early. And so they will forever need new cartoons, new creators, new movies. This is a never-ending need. And we are the myth makers of today. We are the makers. And so you just have to hone your skills. This advice I think is horrible. Like, just wait. Don't wait. Like, make stuff. Put it on TikTok, put it on YouTube. Just keep making stuff. I think the biggest lesson I learned in school was dedication beats talent. And the other one that I learned was speed matters more than anything. Because the more stuff you make, the better you get, right? And so if you're fast, guess what? You make even more stuff and you get even better. And if you're really fast, I don't encourage this, but I've had 2 full-time jobs. And because I was really fast, I could do it. I learned 3 full-time jobs, too much. But 2, doable.
That works, yeah.
Terrible advice. But this is when I was a lot younger.
I am curious, as you've gone through all those successes and failures and rejections in your career and pivots and like all the different things you did, how is your relationship to your art in the industry? How has it changed over the years?
The biggest change has been, I try to do art outside of animation. I try to paint a lot. I do a lot of pro bono work. I do a lot of things on the side, because animation takes so long and I miss the sense of completion. And so when I paint, I can get a painting done in a day. I can't get anything done in a day in animation. And so that's really sort of allowed me to go, I'm still an artist because I'm still making these things, but I'm also an animation artist and I'm a director, but that's a job. And the thing I hate about animation is how expensive it is, and especially
Hmm.
at the stage I'm in where I go, oh, I can make a movie for $35 million. I don't need $200 million. That's still $35 million. So that's been my relationship to it. And one of the dumbest things that I did early was I tried to separate my artist life and my personal life. And honestly, I think that was idiotic because when you're an artist, it's not like a little switch you turn off. You're an artist at all times. We're
Oh yeah.
like we're like Superman. Just because he dresses up like Clark Kent, he's still Superman. We're artists all the time. And so I've now embraced this idea that my life is my art and my art is my life. And I meld them and I work with my wife and I work with my friends and we talk about all this stuff all the time and it's all around us. And yes, we live in a bubble and most of our friends are artists, but that is our life. And that's okay.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong with that because people are like, you should hang out with non-artists. And I go, sure, but I'm not working with them.
Well, I mean, also like you're saying, like, about for artists that, you take influences from life. Like your art is how you see the world. If you separate those things, then like, what are you like?
Right,
You've severed the connection.
right.
What's going to happen there?
And as artists, we gravitate towards other people that are, have this dichotomy in them of letting all their feelings out and all their expression come out, but also trying to navigate the realities of being a grown up and an adult and paying, the rent and the like. That's such a dichotomy. Guillermo del Toro talks about this, where we have to have the sensibility and the heart of poets, but we have to have the endurance of barbarians and boxers, and that's a really difficult thing. And so you gravitate towards your tribe.
Mhm. Yeah. Let's see if there's any other questions in the chat.
10 minutes. We got 10 minutes.
Oh, we got 10 minutes. Pull out some more coffee. I feel like a couple of these were already answered in the chat. Here's a quick one. Which do you prefer more for your own animations, 2D or 3D?
I have this idea that at the end of the day, it's all flat, right? It's all a flat screen. So I love stop motion, but there's things about stop motion I don't like. I've never seen a good fight in stop motion. Apologies to certain movies. I've never seen CG be as expressive as 2D, but I've never seen 2D do some of the things that CG can do. So I think they all have their strength. The tactile quality of stop motion I adore. Uh, I think I like the one that I'm not doing the more because I romanticize it, right? The grass is greener. So whenever I'm working in CG, I'm like, 2D. I'm working on a 2D thing right now, and I'm like, man, if this was CG, it'd be a lot easier.
Yeah,
So,
they're like, oh, I wouldn't have to worry about keeping the fingers on model every single frame. They'd just be there.
and honestly, I love them all, and I love, I love mixing them up. So I'm trying to mix them up a lot more than I'm allowed. But as an art form and as a medium, animation to me is the art form that mixes the most art forms, and so I genuinely love it.
Very cool. I don't see any other questions in chat right now which haven't been answered by the discussion. So I'm going to pull out a question. Oh, here's a big one.
Oh boy.
From Etchy5, what was the most pivotal moment in your life?
What was the most pivotal moment in my life? I'm going to tell you guys. When I was 18, I got sent to jail for driving under the influence, trying to cross the border drunk with a bunch of kids. I was a kid, obviously, at 18. And they put me in a Scare Straight program because it was a federal crime because it was in the border. And so I got sent to a maximum security prison for 2 nights and 3 days. And I saw my life. I literally saw my whole life. I had been accepted to CalArts, and it really, really changed me. It really made me go, I get a second chance. I get a reboot. and I could have killed somebody, and I could have messed up my whole life, and I could have ruined other people's lives, and it worked. I got threatened. It was the most horrible experience of my life. And after that, I felt I can survive anything because now I have a
Hmm.
point of reference. So and my wife makes fun of me for this, and he's like, you can take anything negative, like your superpower is you can take anything negative and judo it to motivate you. And I think that's served me well in Hollywood.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay. So I'm curious, and this is a selfish question on my part. I want to know more about the Feathers McGraw statue.
All right, so Feather McGraw. So of course I'm an Aardman lover, right? I love Aardman. Wrong Trousers, I think, is a work of art. And I met Peter Lord a long time ago, but I met Merlin, the co-director of the new Wallace and Gromit. He was out here for the Oscars. We had breakfast, and he said, "Hey, we're doing this exhibit of Wallace and Gromit characters for hospitals in the UK. What if you paint one?" And I was like, "What?" And before I knew it, it showed up in my house, and I'm almost done, but I'm not allowed to show pictures because they're going to do a big reveal. Uh, but he is by far, Feathers McGraw is one of my favorite on-screen villains.
I
I
love him
love him.
so much.
Yeah.
It's just like the design, the simplicity, just also the just it's perfect. He's
No
so good.
eyebrows, no mouth, no pupils. Like what they do with that character, it's incredible.
So much. Everything like Wallace and Gromit. I also just love Wallace and Gromit in general. Just perfect vibe, but just that freaking penguin. So good.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think we have time for probably about one or two more questions. So let's see what we got. Okay, let's go with this one. From Ilutim Condor. Probably not pronouncing that right, but we're getting there. Have you had any time or any moment where you doubt even for a second, or have you always had that motivation? And if you did have that doubt, how did you get out of that feeling?
So I used to think I've never had imposter syndrome, and I was talking to my therapist about this, and he said, "Fascinating," like a classic therapist, right? He was like, "Fascinating. Tell me more."
He's like,
And I'm
ooh.
like, and I was like, "Yeah, I've always felt like I had to work 10 times harder than everybody else."
Hmm.
And he goes, "That's imposter syndrome. You
Oh
thinking you
no.
have to do, you're thinking you had to do more." But again, it
Mm.
served you well because instead
Mm.
of it crushing you or instead of it demoralizing you, it fueled you.
Mm.
So that's kind of what I found. I found that, especially in school, I realized there's two types of artists: artists that are chasing success, right? The carrot of success, money, adoration, the respect of their peers, and then there's artists like me who are running away from failure. To me, failure is a monster that's chasing us, and I taunt that monster. And anytime I get tired or anytime I'm not motivated, I go, "Wow, am I proving the people who don't believe in me right? Am I letting down? I mean, I go hard, right? I go, am I letting down my son? Am I letting down my family? Am I letting down my ancestors? Am I letting down my whole culture? Am I letting down every single person who believed in me?" And by the time I finish
Mm.
that, there's a fire like a monster behind me, and I just raw, and I dive in. And there's a Picasso saying that I love, which it's about inspiration, right? He goes, "Inspiration is real, but it can only find you working." Meaning, as long as you're working, you get inspired. And I really believe that. And so I get so much joy making stuff and working. So when people tell me like, "Oh, I have a hard time motivating myself. I have a hard time uh, jumping in. I have a hard time staying in it. I have a hard time sustaining this." Maybe it's because I'm autistic, but I don't. They're like talking a different language. I don't understand. Like how?
Mm.
And the first diet, and people hate me when I tell this. The first diet I did in school was video games. I was like, for the amount of time that I'm spending on a video game, I could watch so many movies and I could be doing so much other productive stuff. And I love video games, but that was the first thing I cut out. And I was a bastard. This is mid 90s. I would go to the swap meets in Tijuana and I would buy the most addictive PlayStation 2 video games I could find. And I would hand them out like drugs at school.
Strategy.
And I was like, if I need your computer time, and if you can't control yourself, I will use your computer time.
You just opened the door. They walked through. So like,
yeah, it's like, hey, I dropped some drugs. If you use them, that's on you.
That's great. But like, what I really love about the perspective you're offering is that, like, with Agora community, we have a community from everywhere. We have people who are doing the traditional route of they go to school, they go to the online school. We have people in our community who they're working to become animators, and they only have like 6 hours of electricity in their country because their country only has that before it gets shut off. We have people from every single story and background you can imagine. Yeah. And I really hope for more of that in our industry and more of that in animation and more of those stories. That is something which I really want more of for all of us. So I think everything that you've shown in your presentation today, everything that you've done in your career, how you've persevered in your career, that is, I think, valuable for, the stories you've told and for the others who will come after you to also tell their own stories as well. So.
Oh, listen, thank you. Super, super kind words. You're going to make me cry.
We got one more minute. Any words? Anything else from the crowd?
Yeah, or any last 4 o'clock? All right, you guys.
There we go. Thank you very much, Jorge. That was fantastic.
3 hours packed into one.
That was awesome, man. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.